The Grim Drive podcast explores mental health through the lens of professional sports and athletes. Pro athletes come forward more and more with stories about their mental health journey, what they have endured, and how they managed to push through, reflecting a mental health stigma that continues to be reduced. Pro athletes also leverage mindset to achieve peak performance, as well as representing and often driving elements of popular culture through the use of social media, technology, and personal branding. This places athletes front and center as role models for people of all ages, giving them a platform to reach many and deliver important information, including information about mental health. Welcome to the Grim Drive podcast, where we explore mental health through the lens of professional sports and athletes. My name is Jonathan Westfield. I'm here with my co-host John Cunha and our third host, guest co-host Madeline Cerullo. Thanks again for joining us, Madeline. She was on our first Ted Lasso episode, so we did season 1, recap. We did favorite scenes. We did funny moments, takeaways, lessons learned, things like that. That was our last episode, so we obviously encourage everyone, if you're listening to this episode and you haven't checked that one out first, probably want to go back and go through our episode on Ted Lasso season 1 first. It makes for a lot more sense for how this episode's going to go. So again, today we're getting into season 2 of Ted Lasso. We'll start with key lessons. Do you guys have any that stand out to you? Madeline, we'll go to you first.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Neither of you will be surprised by this. One of the key lessons I thought was like true self. So I think, one of the scenes that I really loved that kind of emulated this was a rare scene between Rebecca and Roy. Rebecca has sassy daughter like visiting her for the day, and Roy is with Phoebe, his niece, and they're walking down the streets, and Rebecca is telling Roy how she's having like such a hard time connecting with Sassy's daughter. Like they used to get along so well, and she's running out of things to do. And Roy says something about kids just like want to feel like they're a part of our lives. So instead of like trying so hard to impress them, just like have them be a part. And then of course he's like subtly says to Phoebe, like, hey Phoebe, I have my appointment. I forget what appointment it is. Yeah. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, I think it's what's the foot doctor? A podiatrist?
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah. But I just thought that was like a really cool takeaway, true self, like, and connecting to kids of like, it doesn't really take much of just like you being you. So start off with that feel good moment.
Yeah, that's great because Roy, again, just shows he subtly kind of has layers to him.
And emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, and very emotionally intelligent. And definitely gets kids. I think it's interesting how well he connects, even though he's like, an Oscar the Grouch kind of on the outside.
He's raw on the outside.
It doesn't prevent him from connecting, and it almost kind of like helps him in some ways, I think, especially because of his underlying emotional intelligence. So that's a great one. John, what about you?
Yeah, well, to piggyback off that, and then I'll go into mine too, of like, I think the way he connects with them of just like through blunt honesty, like you were saying, like he's just allows them to be a part of it. I think for kids, especially that age, like talking to them, not like they're adults, but that they're people. I think that's part of the reason why like that authenticity of like yourself coming through. I think that's why he does so well with the kiddo. So that's really fun.
That's a good point.
The one theme that I saw was in season 2, especially, was like ego. And I found it in sort of like in two different characters I thought did like developments. There was plenty of that. I'm not going to talk about Jamie, but again, like the relinquishment of his ego. But I saw Roy and Nate, like the two examples of how ego developed in like different ways, right? Like for Roy, I think it was a little bit of like breaking that ego down and being more vulnerable and being more like connected to himself. And I thought that was a really, really great way of like relinquishing that and being more attuned to himself. And I think Keeley really helped him with that. And then Nate sort of like the opposite, right? Of someone who like didn't really have an ego and then you start to see signs of his ego building in the wrong way, where it's like I'm doing these things for myself, not for the team. And I thought that was a really cool like intersectionality of like both sort of going in opposite directions. Roy like breaking through his ego and being more authentic with himself and like accepting, and Nate having this like dose of ego and feeding into it,
Mm-hmm.
and it going in the wrong way. And I really liked that. And I imagine that we're going to see much more of that in season 3. We'll talk about season 3 predictions, but that was one of the big like themes that I pulled out from season 2 that was like just fascinating to watch throughout.
Absolutely. So those are both great ones. I have a few. I would say they kind of break into like 3 categories. There's like 3 that kind of relate to the plot of season 2 and the characters, and a little bit to the whole ego kind of swaying between different characters. Then I have one that kind of references more like Riser and Tread in our work in therapy with guys and things like that. And then I have a few that relate more to the podcast and to sports and the overlap between sports and mindset and mental health. So I'll start with the ones that relate to like the characters and ego and things like that. First one is, not everyone's great at everything. I think that's kind of a takeaway or a lesson for me, is that like Beard and Roy, for instance, are great in many ways, but when Ted has a panic attack, neither of them have a clue how to step in, if you guys notice that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Nate is the one that steps in calmly and just starts very methodically telling people what to do and making a substitution and things like that.
Right.
Now, that also, ties into it's both a strength for Nate, but also really tied into one of his major weaknesses, a bit of like a narcissistic kind of thread that gets pulled.
Yeah, it feels like that was like, I'm going to use this moment for myself,
Yes.
not necessarily for the benefit
Correct.
of like Ted King.
Correct.
Right? That's kind of how that
Exactly.
felt in that
Yep.
moment.
So the nature of how he does or uses it is problematic for especially for the long term. But in the moment where Beard and Roy, they're great coaches, they're great people in different ways. Beard's extremely smart. We just talked about Roy and his emotional intelligence, but in that moment, they really had no idea what the hell to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in terms of not everyone being great at everything, Ted can't also be a sports psychologist. I think he kind of gets threatened by the fact that he can't be, and he wants to be everything, I think, to everybody, but doesn't always know how to do it. Maybe that's not why he was threatened by Dr. Fieldstone. I think it might have been also because of his own awareness that he is burying a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some of that. So that was one. Not everyone being great at everything, and you have to accept that you have strengths and you have things that you're probably not going to be good at. Strengths, weaknesses that you can change, weaknesses that you can't change. And that's usually how I like to break it down. The next one is, it's important to try not to be everything to everyone, and to like welcome not being the smartest person in the room. I think that kind of ties into Ted a little bit, because he welcomes. We talked about season 1, him welcoming the ideas of some of like Nate when Nate was like lower on the food chain, but he feels threatened by Dr. Fieldstone when she comes in, right? So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. Ted's sort of threatened by her in different ways, and again, that might tie into his own kind of mental health and what he's holding in. And the third one is pride is a weakness, as is envy. So again, like Ted with Dr. Fieldstone, there's a little bit of pride there. Obviously, Nate with Ted, Nate with the laundry. Who's the one that took Nate's place? What would we call him?
I don't know his name.
I don't know his name.
I
literally was just thinking about
He's
that.
like the equipment guy, right?
Yes.
Like the equipment boy. So Nate with him, because he is the one who gets Nate the jersey that says Wonder Kid on the back. When Nate was messed up, instead of saying Wonderkind, he said Wonder Kid.
Yeah.
And then so the kid gets in this jersey as a way to celebrate him and say, hey, like, you're the Wonder Kid. You did a great job. You stepped in. And Nate cannot, he actually waits until he's alone with that kid and threatens him. If he ever does that again, he'll make his life miserable. Basically, Nate with everybody in terms of the whole pride thing getting in the way. And this is like the shift and downfall of Nate. I was wondering if you guys picked up on why he says that Ted abandoned him. I think it's because of when Nate offers to talk to Isaac, Ted kind of laughs him off and says, we have to get him a real big dog. I think that was the turning point.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I don't know that. I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, what was there? Because he references, Nate flips out at the end.
Right.
And really goes off on Ted, swearing and everything, and calls him an asshole and fuck you and all that stuff. And I was like, what was the moment that turned for him? And maybe there wasn't, but I think the one that stuck out to me was there was that moment where Isaac was struggling as the leader, and Nate offered to talk to him, and Ted laughed him off and said, we have to get a real big dog, and has Roy be the one that steps in and really psychologically works with Isaac to change that around. I think that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, so I think that that was on top of what was already existing. I think that the introduction of Roy as a coach was the beginning of
Good point.
And I think Nate feeling threatened that his position was being sort of superseded by Roy.
Yep.
And then that example would probably be an example of almost confirming his fear that I'm being displaced and removed, and Roy's taking my place. And then this is the perfect example of I'm seeing this in real time where I should be doing that, but then Roy is. I think that was probably one of the things that I think for
Which
him.
happened first? Did Roy become a coach and then help Isaac, or did he help Isaac and that's what led him to?
Ooh, I don't know.
I think that happened first
I do think.
Oh, maybe.
I think that happened first. I could be wrong. I think that happened first, and then the moment that you're talking about, I think, is when Roy leaves the set of the commentary show. He's in the media, right?
Yep.
He leaves the set, fed up, like I can't do this anymore.
Yep.
Wearing the all black suit, okay, which is what Nate eventually buys for himself.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never made that
Oh, yeah.
connection.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
Wow.
he tries to become Roy.
Roy.
Like you're totally on spot on with
Yeah.
that. Like he gets very threatened by Roy, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, fuck you, I'm going to be
Right.
better than you or whatever. So Roy leaves the studio, comes into the stadium mid-game wearing the all-black suit, and that was the first game that Nate had wore the gray suit that Ted bought for him. He was very emasculated by the fact that it wasn't. Someone made a comment about it not being a nice suit,
Yeah.
and someone made a comment about the fact that Ted bought it for him.
And he went suit shopping with Keeley.
That was later, right?
Yep.
But that's when he buys that
Right.
all-black suit,
Right.
So then, like when Nate's wearing first game, he's like, I'm gonna take myself seriously. Because it was after the Wonderkin thing. So he's like, I'm going to, I belong here.
Yeah.
Where's the gray suit? And then not only does he get made fun of in two different ways about the suit, but then Roy comes strolling in with the all black suit, looking dapper, and becomes a coach like mid-game.
Right.
I think that happened after the Isaac
you're
coaching
right.
piece.
Sure.
And it all wrapped up together, and it was just like,
Yeah.
I think that was the downfall,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think like pride around Nate being like actually knowing a lot about the sport and being like the third coach.
Yes.
Whereas like Ted and Beard don't really know much about
Especially
the sport.
Ted, right?
Yeah. And so
yeah.
I feel like there's this like underlying anger around that of like he's like lived and breathed this his entire life, and here are these two Americans that come in and have no idea what they're doing but are dictating what he can do.
Yes.
So I wonder if that contributes to it as well,
Sure.
because then you have Roy come on, who actually does know the sport and was on the team himself,
Good point.
and so adds to this like dynamic for Nate.
Good point, because Nate
Right.
actually even says that in the rant at the end to Ted.
Yeah,
He's like, you don't effing belong here, basically.
Yeah.
Like, who do you think you are, kind of thing. And I see where he's coming from. At the same time, and we've talked a lot about this, like, you don't have, in my opinion, not only do you not have to know the ins and outs of a sport to coach an athlete
Sure.
in that sport, I actually think sometimes it's a benefit. Sometimes, right? I think just from a general, like, mindset, performance coaching kind of thing, I don't think you always have to be an expert and former athlete in that sport to do it. I know I've worked with athletes in sports like fencing and other things I've
Right.
never done. I know you've done the same, right? Where it's like you haven't played every sport of an athlete that you coach. And so I think from Ted's perspective, I actually think the fact that he is not a soccer expert does benefit him
Yeah.
in some ways. Obviously, Nate's not going to see that, and
Right.
it does tie into what you just said. So there's also the whole prize to weakness thing. I think, like, we talk about how the beginning and the end and the downfall of Nate and the shift. Rebecca also teaches him how to be assertive. This was like a key thing that kind of kept that train moving. Her pre-walk-in room thing is like legit. That like actually kind of freaked me out. So we've also talked about like, coaching with guys in terms of like body language and like, shoulders back, head up when walking through a threshold to remind yourself to like that it matters to your overall mood. So like she gets into some of that kind of stuff. And I never noticed this until the second time through, but Rupert, you guys pick up on the fact that he offers to give his share at the funeral. He offers to give his shares to Rebecca when walking out of the funeral, and immediately goes to Nate and whispers in his ear.
Oh,
I never picked this up until the
Neither
second
did
time. And presumably that's when he offered him to be the next coach.
sure.
Which was before the final game. And before, this is like what led up to him flipping out at Ted. Because I think
Yeah.
at that point, he
Yeah.
had
He
the
had
offer on the
something.
table.
Right.
So he was emboldened to be like, now I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel. Because guess
Sure.
what? Now I'm
'Cause
going to
I'm
be
leaving.
a coach that's opposite you. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are my three that relate. Any thoughts on those or any other key lessons from season 2 for you guys?
I think, just got to shout out to the females. I think Rebecca, like, trying to become this, as she says, boss ass bitch in
That's a great
season
line.
2.
Yeah.
I feel like even though she presents that way in season 1, I feel like this element of Rupert is always like
Yes.
pulling her back.
Yep.
Whereas I feel like her, just like the group that surrounds her pushes her into this like element of like being the leader and like, actually being possibly a better leader than he is. So I felt like that was a really big takeaway of just like shedding light on her more vulnerable parts, but also like leaning into the things that make her so great anyway. And then, of course, the fall of Sam and her together at the end.
Yes. Very true. Very true. What about you, John?
No, but I think we covered most of the stuff that was like really stood out for me. We saw a lot more like character development and stuff like that. We saw a lot more of Coach Beard, which I really liked because you didn't get a whole glimpse of him in season 1. He was sort of like the funny offhanded comments like when Ted was talking or things like that, but you got to see a little bit more like behind the scenes of him and his character and his relationships with, his girlfriend, all that different stuff. So that was kind of a cool piece too.
Absolutely. I got a couple more. So my one that relates to like male mental health, I think is just the concept of like middle-aged men, particularly from the Midwest, and I'm sure from the UK for that matter, still being skeptical, a la Ted Lasso, about the concept of therapy. Yeah. I hope they watch this show, maybe keep an open mind, and it allows them to consider, the concept of mental health or the benefit of therapy for themselves. Ted Lasso, his line where he says, someone asked him, "What do you think about therapy?" And I think it's Dr. Fieldstone asked him that, and he goes, quote, "General apprehension and a modern Midwestern skepticism." Why do you ask? No, so actually I think Beard maybe asked him, or someone asked him in the locker room about therapy, and Dr. Fieldstone, that's how he answers. So it's because he had a bad couples therapy experience. How many guys have that middle-aged guys has that probably happened to, where their only therapy experience has been in couples therapy, where they probably felt like they were being attacked, whether or not they actually were. A lot of times there's some accuracy to that because they're not doing much in the relationship. But I think that's been the experience for a lot of guys, where the only exposure to therapy has been a negative couples therapy experience, which may or may not tie into the loss of a relationship. And so the association with therapy is obviously going to be negative at that point. Ted also does the often cliched thing. I don't know if you've ever seen guys do this in session. I've had this happen all the time, where they sort of ask or motion to like, "How should I sit on this therapist couch routine?" Have you ever had a guy do that? Like, should I lie down? Should I be facing the window? That like, have you had that happen?
Yeah. Where should I sit? How should I sit?
Yeah. Should I be facing away from you? Like the sarcasm? Like guys.
Do I close my eyes and fold my hands?
Yes. Especially guys over 30, probably even over like 35 or 40, always start with that thing. And it's
probably
it's
why
like
it hasn't happened. It's usually kids for me, and they just jump right onto the
couch. No. Middle-aged guys definitely do that, and it's a way to disarm the whole process and like kind of I mean, it's what Ted does, right? He turns to humor as a way to deflect raw emotion, right? And eventually vulnerability is hard for him. He overtalks his way through it. He uses humor, and then he eventually just gets up and walks out, which again happens often. So I thought that was a key thing, like just showing that middle-aged men are still resistant to the idea, and that it's a good thing to keep an open mind to it, because things get worse initially, but get much better because of that. And then the two things I had that relate to like the Grim Draft podcast, and specifically, John, your work when it comes to like sports performance and recovery. One was tactics used to regain perspective very quickly, right? So there's the one we talked about earlier, which I understand, guys. It's not going to become an evidence-based practice, right? where Beard and the bar fans lie to the hostess to say her house is on fire, and then say that because of that, her next day is going to be amazing. So there's that one. Then there's Roy's strategy to have Isaac go to the local kind of pitch to get the aggression or fun back. That was to me a way to like a device to help regain perspective very quickly, right? Isaac I wouldn't say he was too high on himself, but maybe he had just been detached from what got him to be a pro for so long that it was missing from his game. And by Roy bringing him back down to that field that was outside of the the building that Roy grew up in to play against amateurs, but like who are pretty aggressive on the field, really woke Isaac back up and got him his kind of thing back. So I think that that tactic to regain perspective as an athlete is really key. And I know you do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I saw it sort of in the same way, but a little bit deeper of I saw that as like a technique of getting back access of like why you even started playing the game to begin with.
Yeah.
And I see this with a lot of athletes who are maybe further on their career or at the pro level or just about to be, that it becomes so business-esque. Like the whole process of becoming a pro athlete is like then now, and even worse so now where you're your own brand and you have to be worried about that.
And after years, because it's a job at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, for them it is. That's their livelihood.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that because if you ask an athlete why they started to play a game, 99% of the time it's because I loved to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the further you get from that, you lose that, and then the why am I even doing this starts to get disjointed. And if you're not having fun, and I know it sounds cliche, but if you're not having joy when you're on the pitch, track, pool, court, field, wherever, if you're not having joy as like that underlying foundation of why you're doing that, you lose perspective, you lose vision, you lose focus, you get complacent, you stop working as hard. It all starts to deteriorate. And so, I think it was definitely for him to like get some perspective back into his game, but also to just get a re-access to like, this should be fun. And part of you playing aggressive is fun. Like that's a part of who you are. That's a part of your game. And that's you having fun. And so I really enjoyed that. But that stuff comes up all the time. For younger kids, it's not as much because they still enjoy the game for the most part. Although I will say that it's definitely been shifting, and we've had conversations about youth sports and the problems that come along with that. And I've definitely seen it happening younger and younger, where they're like, I play because I have to make this special team, and then if I don't make this team, then I won't be able to get that team.
Becomes
and if I don't
obsessive.
Get that team, I won't get into college. And I'm like, whoa, how did we get to college? You're 10 years old. So it's definitely getting worse. But I think that that being the foundation of helping people understand, like, if you're not having fun, stop. Not necessarily stop playing, but stop and reassess and gain some perspective.
Gain some perspective. Yeah, and I think that relates to more than just athletes too. I think I certainly can relate. I think not everyone's fortunate enough to go into like their line of work or their career. Not everyone's fortunate enough to go into a line of work or a career that aligns with their passion or what like really brings them joy.
Yeah. Some don't want to either.
Some don't want to.
Some don't have a desire to. They're like, I'm totally fine.
I get that elsewhere. Yes.
And home in life being life. And
Very true.
I don't need to do what I love.
Very true. Yeah, so that's a great point. And I think for people that do it that way, that's totally fine. The ones that do are lucky enough in their own way, because that's what they want, to get a career or line of work that aligns with their joy or their passion or purpose. I think it's no matter what it is, sports or like even as a therapist, I think if you get to the point where there is no joy and it doesn't tie into why you originally got into it, it's a great time to find a way to regain perspective. And I think there are different ways to do that. I know for me, it's always been taking vacations. And I think the last 2 years has made that really hard. And it's impacted me. It has led to like my ability to do my job, and have fun doing it be a little bit less than it was before, because I always used vacations as a way to detach, reassess, and regain that perspective. I would always come back like totally fresh, renewed enthusiasm and passion. And I've found other ways to replace that, but that's definitely, I think it's key to find those things.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to rewind it back a little bit to you talking about like actually seeing what therapy looks like for males.
Yeah.
This might be a controversial statement, but I actually think Dr. Fieldston's engagements in the moments are actually more stereotypical of what therapy looks like.
Very true.
And
that's
so,
all my nitpicks. But
yeah, and maybe we'll talk more about it there. But I just feel like it may deter people more. Like I think what actually normalized it in Ted Lasso was the experiences outside of that, and like Ted Lasso having a panic attack, or all of these people, that the events of supporting each other around Dr. Fieldston, and she's just like there to like make the introduction to this. But I actually think her engagements around like her limited talking in sessions and all those things, it's hard for people to connect in those moments and feel and not feel that sense of awkwardness. And so as a clinician watching that, I'm like, oh, it's so not this. It's so not this. Please don't think it's this. Yes. So that would just be like one nitpick I had about the in terms of like normalizing it for males, because I don't want it to be their only exposure to what it's like.
No, it's true. That's a great point, because that also ties into like there's a bit of a dichotomy between Ted using humor and over talking to deflect.
Right.
Whereas Dr. Sharon Fieldstone uses her intelligence and stoicism to deflect in her own ways. And her friend actually even makes a comment about this to her on the phone.
Yeah.
And then you get into, I think the main kind of device they used her character for, I totally agree with you on the nitpick, because it's like it's the worst aspects of a lot of therapists, or the way they try to portray therapy in shows or TV.
Yeah.
This like stoic, silent, but here's the moment I'm going to drop on you because I'm so smart.
That happens every 50 minutes apparently.
Yeah, that like totally that I kind of can't stand.
Right.
But the thing that I do like is that they really show behind the scenes that when even though you're good at helping other people, you might still be really struggling. Totally. And I was hoping when I first watched that season, as it was unfolding, I'm like, I hope they get into that, because that's often the case. And they do get into that. She kind of isolates.
Mm-hmm.
She drinks too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like she cleans up all the alcohol bottles when he comes
Her
over.
boundaries are a little bit suspect too, with her and Ted. Yeah, a little suspect.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very
coming
true.
over to the house and all that.
Yeah,
Like, all right.
that does not happen.
Not okay.
Exactly.
Some issues.
Exactly.
There, for sure.
Exactly. So that's a great point. My only other one along the sports realm is sports performance realm is the importance of the possible importance, I should say, of dividing and being intentional about on-field versus off-field personality. So Roy telling Jamie that he has to divide, Nate almost kind of does this in season 1 to Roy in that conversation where he's like, got to use your anger kind of thing. But then Roy tells Jamie in season 2 that he has to divide. He doesn't say this literally, but he kind of alludes to the fact that he has to divide his on-field versus off-field personality. He can be a prick on the field. If anything, he needs to do that. He needs to lean into that more. But that doesn't mean he has to be a narcissist off the field in everyday life. And I think that's what Jamie really struggled with, was like he was too much of a narcissist, and it helped him as a player, but really hurt him in every other aspect of life. Then he tried to correct that and grow as a person, which is great, but went way too far to the other side and lost that edge on the field. And what Roy kind of pointed out is like, you still can have that on the field, but just stop being a prick off of it kind of thing. Right. And that really clicked in for him, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So, John, do you ever work with athletes on like on-field versus off-field persona?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think especially for athletes, it's like, they go into an environment that they feel the most confident, the most comfortable, the most accomplished, and it's easy to develop yourself within that arena.
Yeah.
And then not knowing or doing things differently or expanding upon other parts of yourself outside of that sport, it's easy for that carryover to happen. And there's lots of really great things that come out of some of that stuff. Hard work.
Yep.
One of my favorite quotes from Ted Lasso was, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." And I loved that. That's a big thing that we talk about of like luck is just hard work and opportunity, and that's what usually happens. So I often work with that, and I do a lot of times. This comes up with athletes who are going through like pretty significant injuries, is because they lose that self for a long period of time and are left with like, well, who the hell am I now, right? If I can't be the person on the field, I have nothing, right? And the hard conversation for athletes is that there is a shelf life for it. Even if you're a professional athlete, there's going to be a time where you're not going to be an athlete. You're going to be someone without that. And the cultivation of working on, you are not just a performer, you are a person, you are a friend, you are a brother, a sister, whatever it happens to be. And working with them on developing those different things, all that does is just feed into their sense of confidence. And anger is one that comes up a lot. And I think it gets a pretty bum rap. And Roy's like a perfect example of how anger can be a really positive emotion. You just have to gain mastery and control over it and repurpose it towards something that's like actually useful, right? And you see this transformation of him doing it in season 2 of actually like using his anger to perform.
So anger is not an energy; it's an emotion.
What? It is an emotion.
It's an emotion. Cool.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. It is an emotion, like all the others. And if you gain control and mastery over it, it's a super powerful, right? Your adrenaline is pumping, your focus goes in, right? You're in this sort of like survival mode, and if you can learn to control, capture, and repurpose that into something productive, it's incredibly useful. And why would you want to displace that emotion when you have all of this extra pieces going into that? So however, if you learn that like I'm productive with anger as an emotion, then that's, oh great, I maybe could use that same tactic outside of sports where it's not appropriate. And learning how to manage, okay, in-game stuff, these are the things and the tools that are going to help you be the most effective and produce the best. Outside of it, it's going to look a little bit different. And being angry towards a problem might not have the same results if you're working on like writing a paper, just a random example, versus trying to play soccer. So it's helping them understand that while you are your one self, there are different parts, and there are different times and places for each part for that to come out and be productive.
Yeah, and that's fantastic because it ties into what we talked about in the first episode, season 1, when we covered season 1 of Ted Lasso, about, where they don't reference this, but there's some hints about like, IFS parts kind of stuff, or at least I picked up on like them sort of the character development shows that where there's different parts that kind of come out. And that's a great example. It's like this angry part, this prick on the field, like we don't want that to take over your life and be you all the time because that part is just stepping in without your permission. but we definitely want to be able to tap into that because that
Yep.
helps you on the field, and it
Yep.
gets a result both for your team and it throws the other team off, right?
Mhm.
So all right, so I got 3 more takeaways I'm going to rapid fire it through, and then I got 3 impromptu questions that I'm going to give to you guys that I did not tell you about.
On the spot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, boy.
So my
a lot of curveballs
Oh,
today
yeah.
here,
You're
Jotham.
getting curveballs.
Lots of
Okay.
curveballs.
So my 3 quick takeaways before I get into that. One, I don't know if these are lessons learned from season 2, more like takeaways, whatever. Roy calling out the media and himself for what it is, the outside, like being outside looking in and judging. We know that with sports media. We've even tried to be careful because like we don't do podcast episodes like right when news comes out. We try to reflect and we talk about the mental health angles, but we try not to speculate, and that's why, right? Because the media tends to do that way too much. So we've even tried to toe that line. The second one is the fact that couples need space and are often around each other too much. Totally fitting during the pandemic. This happens with Roy and Keely, which is hysterical. That whole
there.
that whole plot line. Which, by the way, like in the moment, there was one moment I actually have on Random Funny where when Roy is reading the Da Vinci Code and he like just goes like I was dying when that happened. All right,
Yeah.
so that's the second one. The third one is. This is kind of a key, I think. Having daughters as a man doesn't absolve you from the past or give you carte blanche to be a dick. Okay, like this. So this is where you love Sassy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Sassy says this to Rupert at the funeral, where like she says that to him, like because he says I've changed. I have a daughter now, and she says like having a daughter doesn't undo all the shitty things you've done to women in your life. And I think that's a very common excuse by guys. Like as soon as they become a father to a daughter, they think that either it absolves the past or it allows them to comment on stuff about women that are like horrible comments, and they're like, no, I mean it, genuinely because I have a daughter, right? Like
Right.
that's
Look at
my
my shield.
that's
Here
my
she is.
that's my ID card. Yeah, exactly, right? Or like using as a shield. It's just horrible. So like that to me was a key reminder, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my 3. All right, rapid fire.
Oh, boy.
I'll go you first and then you. Okay,
Wow.
for each one of them.
All right.
Yep, John. GIF or GIF?
GIF or GIF? Oh, GIF.
Yeah, for
Same.
sure.
Okay, I used to think it was GIF, but I definitely call it GIF.
I thought it was going to be Ted Lasso specific. So
Yeah.
I was like,
Woo! All right.
That was in
Tap.
season 1. They
Oh,
talk about GIF or
yeah,
GIF
right.
all the
They
time.
do. You're
Guys,
right.
come on.
They do.
Sorry.
Come on. I'm not just going off on random tangents here.
I thought you were, and I was
Hey
like,
guys,
okay.
off topic. I've always wondered GIF
Yeah.
or GIF. No.
Let's settle
Embrace,
this.
Yeah.
embrace.
Okay. Second one. 3 dots on a text. Best or worst thing that's ever happened since the like button.
It's worst.
The 3 dots that pop up when someone's about to text you, but they haven't texted you yet.
Totally.
Worst.
Worst.
Yeah. Just gives you so much anxiety.
Exactly.
Especially when they don't send
Exactly.
They pop, you're like clearly thinking of something, just send it.
Oh
right?
my! It just plants that seed of catastrophizing.
Totally,
Like it's
totally.
terrible. I don't know why they ever created
I
that.
agree.
Oh, it's awful.
Okay, so worst thing since the like button on social media.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we come to a consensus. So GIF and get rid of the 3 dots.
Please
All
get
right.
rid of them.
Third and final. Interfere or never interfere by telling a person they should break up with someone.
Ooh.
Oh, great.
Whoa.
Great question. Yeah.
Don't you dare cop out. Or
I'm not.
pass it to her.
I have.
Go.
I can go
Yes.
first. Yeah. I think I've been on both sides of this. I've stepped in with a friend and said, I feel like this relationship is really, really toxic, and I don't see you. I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're now married with a child, right? So tough, right? So
Yes.
you and clearly they know
Yep.
like what my thoughts are. So I think that's part of the danger of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are extenuating circumstances, right? If someone's like unsafe, like you've got to step in and do something, right?
Yep.
Like that's clear. But I think that for what I've learned is that maybe take, this is where you always kind of hard of like friend versus therapist, but kind of towing the line of like helping them maybe see some of the things that might not be in their best, but without like not being their clinician, obviously.
Yes.
Like,
It's
hey,
a
I'm curious
hard
about
line to
like,
toe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious about the
Yeah.
way they treat you here.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? Right? Obviously not doing that, but that's always I think I've learned to just kind of like step out, and it's not necessarily my place to say like this is or isn't good for
Mhm.
you without knowing like anything. And I think the other piece of that is there's so much unknown within relationships that I don't have access to. I just see the way they interact in public, and that might be they might be totally uncomfortable there, and they might be trying to compensate for something, and they might be all these different intricacies come into it. So I'm kind of giving judgments without all the information, which I think that's part of why I was like, you know what, I can just kind of step out from this and just continue to try to support. If I see something that's like really not okay, I'll say something. But I think I've been in that experience, and it's gone really poorly for me. And so I think I've learned to just kind of like, I'll just kind of take myself out from it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like insane. Intervene, but in an informed way.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like I feel like when you're thinking about relationships and you're an observer, you're always thinking about the person that you're closest with and you want the best interest of.
That's a good point.
I also think like John makes the note of like why you don't do it is because there is the reality that they still, it's like when you give a recommendation to a parent of a child that you're doing therapy with, like it's just a recommendation. They can still not do what you're recommending to do.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I'm going to go with intervene in an informed way.
I like that. Yeah, because I've been on both sides of that. When I was younger, I wouldn't call it intervened, but I made a comment to a friend that I didn't think it was a good match between, and I didn't know her long enough, and they got married and have kids. And she's like fucking awesome, and like it was a stupid comment. I was young and ill-informed, and hadn't given the person a chance. And he's the coolest person in the world, so he never held it against me, thankfully, because that could have blown up my face. Later on in life, I think I've had moments with people I care about where I've really been honest with them, and I think it's probably been on both sides where like sometimes it either didn't work out or it led to them like maybe viewing me differently short term or that kind of thing, and other times it worked out really well. I think either way, I always felt like I did the right thing because I think you gain perspective and you do it more in an informed way. I'd rather do that and know that I was honest with the person I care about than to avoid that difficult conversation and potentially not let them into some valuable information that might actually help them. Whether they take it or not, similar to what you said about parents. They might take it or leave it. They might leave it. Totally. But at least you know that you did the right thing by them and you were honest. I'd rather always have authenticity and honesty. Totally. Okay. So let's see. We'll get into some of our favorite scenes now. So I'll start with you, Madeline. What are some of your favorite scenes? She gets the easy one, right? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
You did well, though,
yeah.
John.
You did. Nailed it.
Thank you.
Favorite scenes from season 2?
Okay, so I would say like the heartwarming scene, one of the scenes where Sam starts to push back on that company that is financially responsible for their team.
Yes.
And all of them tape off their, air? Which air?
Dubai Air.
Dubai Air. Yeah.
It's fictional. Yep.
They all tape off the Dubai Air. I just feel like that's such a cool scene for so many reasons. One, it's just like Sam coming into his own. It's also cool to see Jamie take this moment to like align with his teammates and do something that like actually doesn't benefit him in any way. And then it's just also nice to see like the support that comes from it. Like there's no pushback from leadership. Like everybody is just like kind of on his side.
Including Rebecca.
Which
is hard for her because she's got the CEO calling her.
Yep, that's the boss bitch moment, I think.
Yep. That's right.
Yep. So that's that was one of my favorite scenes. I also loved, and you touched on this a little bit, John, but I also loved when Ted Lasso's like describing being curious versus judgmental. And he quotes like Walt Whitman around that. I think it's in one of the pregame talks. But I think I like lived by this a lot during the pandemic, and I think it's like something to live by in terms of just like thinking about how you navigate engaging with others. Like I think that there's so much that gets led by judgment and assumption, and just being curious. Like you joke that we say like, so I'm curious about, but I also think like it's really important to be curious.
Yeah.
Because a lot comes out of like being judgmental. So I really liked that. And I thought it was interesting of Ted to do. I do find they do a lot of this where like some of the players will play out a scenario that they're having a hard time with. Like he's not being very curious about what therapy looks like. He's being judgmental, but then in another scene, he's talking about the importance of being curious and not judgmental. And I see they do that a lot. But yeah, so I would say those are kind of top 2 scenes. There's so many more.
That's true. I want to touch on that last piece. I find that very authentic because I think in life, rarely is it just like you have this epiphany and you make the change. A lot of times there is some flip-flopping and there is some like, well, now I think this, but I kind of think this. And it's like eventually you kind of keep moving towards more of like, being curious and doing things the right way. So I like that because I think it maybe mimics real life a little bit more.
Right.
John, what about you for favorite scenes?
Yeah, and just to touch on that too, I think that type of like epiphany and aha moments is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I think that we see a lot of that with like stereotypical like when you're watching something or watching a therapist like on TV. And I get it. They don't have like months to follow each individual session to get to that point, but it's always that's like the perception of like you go in for 50 minutes. I thought that we'll talk about Dr. Fieldstone. I thought that his rant about like you're charging me for an hour but you're only working 50 minutes, I was like, oh man, that's so perfect. But I think that like every session you go in, you come out and like everything is better. I thought that was one thing I didn't like about it was that piece too. But one of my favorite scenes from season 2, man, there was a ton. But I guess it's more of like a progression of scenes. But the I guess I see the bar people as like a character, rather than like they all are. That there's individuals and they have their little moments, but I see the bar as like a character. And I really liked it. I think it was the end of season 2. I just liked the progression of like from I hate this guy, this wanker, and this whole different thing to like silence when when things are going on and like really cheering them on.
That's a great point.
I loved
picked
it.
up on that.
That was probably one of my like that progression from like, and I thought that it was probably an accurate representation of what would happen if an American coach from here went to Europe and coached. I mean, we see riots for just ownership for like England, for American owners and people striking and people. So I thought that was a cool to get the like. I think England especially has like the hooligan like label for their athletes. I thought it was a cool like we got a little bit of a snapshot of like that and the progression of like buying into the team. So that I really liked that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so one of mine was I would say the entire episode 4 of season 2, the Christmas one.
How did I not?
God.
I mean,
of
course.
I couldn't. This is why I said in episode 1, I was like, I have favorite scenes from season 1. I have favorite episodes kind of from season 2.
All of season 2 was so good.
God, that episode 4, it's like the sexy Christmas party prep where Keely's licking the chocolate just kills me. The neighborhood crawl for a dentist where they know they're going to find a dentist within 10 doors. It's just hysterical. Oh yeah, hilarious. The Nerf fight at Higgins' house, where they're like, promising to tell their loved ones or whatever, like if they die as they're about to engage, and they get crushed by the kid with the Nerf gun. The 12-year-old oogling the French player's Christmas date. Just a subtle, like hilarious, like puberty-driven moment. And the selfie taking 20-year-old dude striking again when he. This is the same character was on the plane in season 1, episode 1, taking a selfie with Ted on the airplane. Also comes in and takes a selfie with Jamie Tart later on in another episode. And then also, the third time, he's at the house that Keely and Roy goes to on Christmas. And he asks Keely for a selfie and spurns Roy. He's the one who's like at the dinner table and he's like, can I get a selfie? And Roy's like, sure, all right, fine. Growls and whatever. And he's like, nah, mate, I met with Keely. And Keely's like this. And so like they eventually take a pic with all three of them together.
It's the same guy.
It's the same character.
So they do those subtle things.
That's cool.
He's when Jamie's getting a haircut, he's the one that comes in and like, takes a selfie with him and puts it on, and then Jamie throws his phone.
Yes.
Same kid.
Okay.
Same 20-year-old. So that was one of my favorite episodes. Another one is episode 9, the beard episode. I'm like on the fence. In some ways, I kind of hate the episode. In other ways,
too. I'm so glad you said it.
It's weird. There's moments I love, but the overall like doing the episode, I didn't like. I don't know how to. So it's like
it felt like a filler.
Exactly.
I think people actually did want to see what Beard was like. So it was like kind of a letdown in a lot of ways.
It was, and I feel like he's the one character where like they kind of allude to him having challenges, like emotionally, but like it feels kind of cheesy. I don't know. Okay. But there's some moments that are just absolutely hysterical. Like just him with the 3 bar guys is just like it's sneaking into the club. Hilarious. The shut up Thierry Henry thing he keeps saying had me dying. He's having some like hallucinogenic like self-doubt, and he lacks confidence despite like being smart, and he makes bad relationship choices. So it's kind of funny in that sense. Then he's in the church after the fight and rain, which again, I thought that was cheesy. But then he says like long time listener, first time caller to God, which is like
so
as
funny.
A former sports radio person, reformed. Thank you. Hearing him say that is just hilarious. So it's funny. It ends well. Like the 3 bar fans get snuck onto the pro field, and as like a fan, if you ever get to be on a pro field, it's like the coolest thing in the world, especially if you didn't expect it. And just seeing them kick the ball around and like pretend like there's a full stadium. It's funny. And Beard's dancing at the end is kind of funny. I think it's, again, the whole episode, I don't know, not really my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Garbage water, I should say, but like kind of, kind of funny at the end. Jane is an absolute shit show. So we won't even get into that. So that I'm on the fence with that episode. The other two that were like kind of favorite scenes for me is one is when Roy comes, you alluded to this earlier, when Roy comes to the Diamond Dogs for advice. It's like his breakthrough moment of being willing to open up to them. I love that. Yeah. And then Ted finishing with a press conference about his panic attack and how we need to change our approach when it comes to mental health in sports. Obviously, that's something that for us is like, you see it and you're like, yes, because it's like it's what we care about. It's what we try to like preach in this show to open people up to learning about this stuff. And obviously that's great. I do have any comments on any of those?
No, I mean, you covered so many.
I know. It brings up, we haven't talked about
I told you I ramble.
No, but it's good.
But Trent Krim from The Independent.
He is great.
I was just thinking this. Say your piece, and then I'm going to tap into one thought I have about him.
Well, fine. I love him.
I love him too. And you know what? He
the
has
Indian food scene.
Amazing hair.
Good.
His hair is like such a flow.
Such a flow. Yeah.
Definitely.
Agreed.
Definitely.
I love him, and I love the little like back and forth that the two of them have.
I hope he has a stronger role season 3.
Me too. That's a hope for
me. He's now Trent Krim independent. Right?
Independent.
Which is great.
Yeah. I just like, again, and I think that's been a general theme across the whole thing, but I think, and that this is a credit to the writing, like, they've been able to develop things like beautifully, right? So Trent Krim comes on and he's ready to like crucify him with that first interview of like, what are you doing here, right? Like, is this a joke? Is this like ridiculous? And then it came like he learned about him, respects him, and then is actually like a supporter of him. That was really cool. But I just love the whole like Trent Krim independent, and then Ted Lasso starts doing that back. I just that whole piece I really enjoyed.
And he's the one that called out Nate, which is
talk
about accountability. He's like,
and admitted it. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
Cool. Yeah. And you never, I mean, that was cool.
Yeah.
That was one example.
Burning his relation or his like reputation. For
Agreed.
the greater good.
That was one example where the 3 dots actually worked out because Ted saw the 3 dots and they put my source is Nate. Thing.
Yeah.
And, so it was interesting.
True.
Yep.
I do have one least favorite scene.
Okay.
I kind of had this last minute. I didn't tell you guys to kind of like create any of yours.
Right, no, go ahead.
There's only one for both seasons. It's when Danny Rojas starts by killing Earl the dog. Dogs should never be allowed to be killed in any show or movie. It should be outlawed by the Academy or whoever makes these decisions. The Writers Guild. I don't know who does it, but like you're never allowed to torture, hurt, or kill a dog or an animal of any kind. Really, there's just no point. I don't think
total tangent, but related. Have you ever seen Mars Attacks?
No.
Glenn Close.
A long time ago.
I do feel like you guys subtly quiz on pop culture all the time. Do you guys notice this about each other?
Yeah, I said it's my useless talent, Madeline.
You're constantly like,
We're really
have
good
you seen this? Have you seen this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen any of this.
You need to catch up.
Attacks.
I know,
the reason it's so bad is because the dog dies in that movie.
Yeah.
How did I blank that out of my memory, man? I haven't seen that movie since
aliens
like,
come into the White House, into the bedroom, and the dog stands up, starts barking, and kill the dog.
What?
It's like, you can't do this. You cannot do. I
no
totally agree.
It.
Totally agree. Movies are dead to me if a dog dies.
Yes,
you can't do it.
Exactly.
Cat, fine.
What
That's
about,
okay.
Like,
Cats
Marley
can die.
and Me? Dog dies in that.
I don't even watch that damn movie.
Oh,
I have never watched it. I will never
watch it. It's a great
crying.
movie. Oh, tons of tears. I'm going to start crying just thinking.
That's why I won't watch it. I'm not prepared
it's like a blubbering.
No.
But you know, you know it's happening. Like you know that this is the progression of how these movies go.
I immediately tie it to my own dog, and I'm a wreck for a week. Like
but I will agree, it was dark in Ted Lasso. Like that was dark.
The second time around still pissed me off. First time around, I was ready to abandon the show. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, there's no need. There's no need. Now, does it? it leads to a sweet story about Ted's dog experience in youth. And it also like relates to like, Danny getting the yips and he wakes up in bed with 2 women on either side having a nightmare about killing a cartoon dog goalkeeper, which is like hysterical.
So funny.
But still, not worth it.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
You
can
get that effect by doing something else.
Totally.
Like the writers need to, Okay. So, had to throw that in there. Okay. Random or funny things from season 2. Madeline, go.
Yeah, so random is the girl in the neighborhood. So she only shows up a couple times, but it's usually in the morning when Ted's getting coffee and he's on his way to the field.
The one he played soccer with in season 1?
The one that he plays soccer with. Okay.
I didn't know she came back.
I like her a lot, and I like her because I feel like it's cool to see Ted like engage with a young kid and she like knows her stuff. But I feel like they have forgotten her. Like, I don't know if she showed up in season 2, and I really liked her.
Yeah.
So, random thought there, but I think they need to bring her back.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah.
I saw her as like the grounding, that like the new environment that he was in.
Yeah.
And she was like the
Connecting
access
with the neighborhood.
and the connection to like,
Well, and maintaining joy. I think it
maybe,
relates
or
to-
maintaining joy,
Yes.
sure.
Oh, that too, yeah.
But I agree. I miss her. She,
And,
like, it was a
like-
cute little like back and
Yes.
forth that
Yeah.
they had, and she was
That's
kind of like,
interesting.
here's, you know,
Totally.
like teaching him about the culture.
Yeah.
And then
Doesn't
she,
have
like,
his son here, so
Right.
it like gives off that fatherly
hadn't even
connection.
thought about that.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's a random, but a good one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Any other random or funny things for you guys?
I think funny thing, this is a really funny one. When Roy is in the ice in the therapy room,
Yeah.
and Ted comes in to talk to him, and he's like, "Oh, did someone order a Roy on the rocks?" And just like again, his quips
I
are
remember
so
that.
good,
Yeah,
but
Yeah, he's sitting in
That
a
one-
trash can filled with like
Yeah,
ice
yeah.
and water. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah,
So
That's great.
another funny one that I enjoy his quips a lot.
Nice. I got a few. So there was one, I already talked about Roy reading the Da Vinci Code and doing the mind blowing
Yep.
thing. There's also a similar one where he's watching the reality TV shows with the old ladies, the group.
Oh,
And,
God, that group, I totally forgot about that.
We forgot
And-
to talk about
yes.
yoga and him.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
And the old ladies love Jamie when he's on the show, Jamie Tart.
Ugh.
And so as they admit they love him, he just gets frustrated and he asks Dolores for a top off of rosé. It's just like fucking hilarious. So there's that one. When Jamie Tart says at the funeral, dress shoes are made for sheep, muggles, and twats. I like almost fell on the ground laughing. It was like so funny. The bye 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 choreography. When he does, Ted Lasso does
Yep.
choreography for
Yep.
when Sharon's leaving.
Mhm.
That was pretty funny. I didn't expect a Rick Astley rendition at the funeral. That kind of like caught me off
Yeah.
guard.
Yeah.
Rick Astley. Okay, pop quiz. All-time voice look mismatch.
Huh.
Have you ever seen what he looks like? They show him in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
just
he
like
was
skinny
he
white
was
dude with red hair.
It was like a popular thing to like Rick Astley people back in the day. Like send him a link. Like what was back when people had
Yes.
like AOL.
Yeah,
games,
yeah,
like
yeah,
send him a
Wait,
link to something, and Rick
yes,
Astley would
and
pop
I
up.
actually had a client
Remember,
describe this to me recently because it's come back. Like I guess
Oh.
in middle school, the "never gonna give you up" is like a big thing.
Oh.
I
This is
for-
what I love about
Full
working with
circle.
kids. You
They
stay in
bring
the
you
loop.
back, totally.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's great.
absolutely.
So I forget why it was coming up, but they kept playing this dance over and over again with him doing
That's
it.
funny.
Yeah.
If you could show me pictures of who Rick Astley, just based on what he sounds like, what he would look like, how he actually looks is probably the last picture
Oh,
I
yeah.
would pick. Other ones, I made a list of like voice appearance
you did.
mismatch Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
David Beckham, slightly,
Interesting. I wouldn't. I
That's
don't know
true. I could see that.
a little bit,
Yeah.
not as much as Mike Tyson. Megan Trainor,
Yep.
all about that bass.
Yep.
Nick Offerman.
Interesting.
No.
I'm still on Megan Trainor. I'm
Okay.
thinking about if I agree with that.
Yeah.
PK Subban.
Oh, I don't want to go. That's a whole other tangent to go down.
Richard Jefferson, former NBA player.
I don't know him.
Don't.
And then my last one, Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug
Oh,
in The Hobbit.
yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of his, like, what makes him so good.
True.
He's, like,
but
so
like when I found out he
transferable.
was the voice, I was like, what?
I know.
So had to go on the deep dive on that.
Yep.
My last two funny things: the British slang in the show is just like
So
awesome
good.
overall,
Yep.
and then the Jamie Tart play on the Baby Shark do thing, like the chant the fans do, and the Roy Kent. He's there, he's everywhere chant.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
fantastic.
so good.
Yeah.
That I welled up on a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes. Oh, when he came back in.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very
So
true.
good.
English commentary for sports is an absolute riot.
English profanity is also just
it
awesome.
is the way in which they describe. Obviously, it's just different. and
Yeah.
for them, it's not different.
Yep.
But like how they describe things and what's happening is just utter brilliance. There's a couple of pretty world-renowned commentators. Roy Hodgins is one who's like he's a Messi like enthusiast. So if you ever is commentating, this is a good YouTube Google like deep dive to go down if you're looking for just funny commentary of listening to him describe what Messi is doing on the field. It is a riot. It is the best, and getting little pieces of it from the show is just like
that's one thing they could
really
actually lean
funny.
into even more. Is
I hope
like
they do.
okay, Major League, right? Remember the movie Major League has Bob Uecker,
yes,
as the announcer,
Yes.
who was actually a pro announcer in real life. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
He was
know that.
a real announcer in real life, but then he also became a character in that movie.
You can tell he's
just a bit outside.
Yeah,
like,
right.
hysterical.
Yeah.
So they could easily in season 3 bring in something in like that. I don't know if they will, but they clearly try to allude to that movie, especially season 1.
Yep.
Okay, so we're running out of time, but we're gonna go into favorite characters. You get one favorite, one runner-up. That's it. Okay. So we're gonna go with your favorite.
Okay, Keely, hands down.
Okay, why?
I just feel like what I like about her is like she's subtle, but she makes herself known in every situation, and then she really comes to fruition in the final part of season 2.
Yeah.
I just think she's the voice of reason. She's easy to connect to. She's funny. She's dynamic. There's so many things. Channel the girl Keely.
She is great.
Mm-hmm. And then runner
She's
up.
fit.
And then runner up would be Sassy. I think she's
Okay,
underrated.
okay, yep.
I want to see more of her.
Didn't know she was a psychologist.
Yep,
You mentioned
she is
that
a
they referenced that. I
psychologist
remember
in
that. Yeah.
season 1. But I think I want to see what happens with her and Ted, but I think her humor's dry. She's a good character.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the Rebecca squad on this one.
Love it.
What about you, John?
I would say, I'll put Ted as my runner-up because
can we all just say Ted is
he's my favorite.
everyone's
Yeah.
favorite?
I love everything about him.
As you know, I'd marry Ted or Jason Sudeikis, whoever's willing to go first. So if you listen to this,
Jason, so he's my favorite, but my close runner-up is actually, maybe this is controversial, but it's actually Higgins.
No, not at all.
I love him as a character.
Not controversial at all.
He's like heart, soul, compassion, like the Christmas episode. He has like everybody that and then everybody just starts showing up, and he's like, come on in. And,
what does he call his little beard when she comes to invite him back, and he's playing the cello?
I don't know.
He calls it something. Okay,
I can't remember. But he's just like, he's one of my favorite characters. He's like steadfast, keeps going. It's team first. What other people need. And I'm hopeful for season 3 we get a little bit more of Higgins. But he's definitely my favorite, like my runner up to Ted.
Yeah,
moving offices just shows a team player.
Yeah, just constantly moving around. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. All right, mine is, I know you would probably be in line with this too, is definitely Roy Kent. Yeah. The anger, the swearing, the underlying emotional intelligence and kindness to his niece. The fact that he cares but seems to hate the fact that he cares.
Yes.
Like, love that.
Yes.
Angry at himself for caring.
Oh god, the growl, everything. Just the whole character is just amazing. As a runner-up, this is kind of a tough one. Man, I was kind of stumped on this. I would have to go with Danny Rojas. I love the simplicity of it.
Interesting one.
I love the simplicity of it. The football is life thing. Fuck, my brother-in-law and I just say that to each other all the time. It's like our intro when we walk in the door. Football is life. Love it. So he's very and also when he's wearing the dress shoes and his feet kill and he goes and gets Rebecca's slippers. He's just like low-key funny but kind of stupid, and I just love it. So he's my backup. All right, we're gonna run through these. Any good Ted quips?
Oh gosh,
I've got one. One of them I thought was really funny.
Yeah,
was one of the things. It was, if that's a joke, I love it. If not, I can't wait to unpack that later. I was just like dying laughing of just like him in a nutshell. That was definitely one of the ones that I was crying about.
That relates
laughing.
to one I have, which is where he says, "I love meeting people's moms. It's like an instruction manual into why they're nuts." Just like, oh god,
so true.
It's so true.
So
it's a
true.
playbook. Yeah. Any quips for you?
I think the only one that I haven't mentioned is when I think this is during his Rupert dart, and he says something like, "This is like when I got addicted to fettuccine. That's a little rich for my blood."
That is a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have one more. It's when he says, "You know my philosophy on cats, babies, and apologies. You got to let them come to you." It's a good one. It's a good one. Any other Ted quips you guys want to throw in?
No.
Okay.
One on the more like serious side, when he was talking to Jamie about I think that you might be so sure you're 1 in a million, you forget that you're out there just 1 in 11. And I really liked that one.
Yeah.
So that's why that's
a great one.
He's so brilliant with
Totally.
these quips of just like, I'm crying, and then I'm also being like, whoa,
Damn.
Yeah.
like, oh shit,
Truth bomb.
there's some
Yeah,
real knowledge
yeah,
right
yeah.
there. Yeah, so that was one of the ones that stood out to me too.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll go through nitpicks really quickly. I'll start. Let's see. Isaac's not exactly in pro athlete shape, but then again, neither is Phil Kessel in the NHL. Ted moving
Kessel.
to the UK and away from his kid.
Yeah,
would really happen.
dicey.
And actually, that's why they're only having 3 seasons, because
Oh.
he does not want to be over there in real life. He wants to be back in the
Yeah.
States with his kid. So
Yeah.
I guess there's some reality
Again,
to that one.
Marry me, Jason.
Yeah.
Sudeikis.
Let's see. And then when Phoebe kicks the ball into Ted Lasso's face in season 1, that is a tailor-made Wilson from Castaway reference. Miss.
Could have done it.
Could have easily had Ted Lasso's blood on the ball. Like, oh god, you guys, they pride themselves on movie references, and they just swung and missed. They whiffed on that one.
absolutely.
Any nitpicks for you guys?
I mean, I already said my Dr. Fieldston one.
Yeah.
I think this is controversial because you both already said you liked it. I hated the Nate scene where he gave feedback to the team, and maybe this is me not knowing much about that. So I'm curious. Obviously, we're out of time, but like, why is that a good strategy? Like, it's just
No,
put
it's not.
everyone down.
Yeah.
So I actually hated that
Yeah.
scene. And then another nitpick is just like the typical heartbreak. Like, we know that Keely and Roy are going to break up. And
I know.
I just like,
Destined.
why do we have to go down that route?
Mhm.
There is a lot of
I don't
cliches,
think
I
they
will
are.
say. You don't.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just go
disagree.
into this.
Let's just-
Okay, I think
that teacher's
I-
coming in hot right
they're-
now.
Nope.
I know.
Okay.
Well,
I think
hold on.
I think they put her there to make us think that.
Maybe.
That is who
Sure.
Ted Lasso will end up with.
No way.
Mark
Interesting.
my words.
I actually feel like
Mark
is a
my
fair
words.
assessment.
I
Ted
don't think
Lasso,
so.
they
Keely and
foreshadow
Ted are
they
destined
to
for each
zig,
other.
but then they zag. Like, they're trying to make you think Roy and Keely are going to break up. They're
Yeah.
not going to,
Okay,
right?
great.
Just like they made you think Ted was texting Rebecca when it was really Sam,
Right.
right? He was walking down right as like
Yeah,
Rebecca's
right.
phone was, but it wasn't him. Like, they're not going to like just spell it
Right.
out for us. So I would guess. Let's go into hopes and predictions for season 3.
Mm.
I actually think it's going to be Ted and Miss Bone,
Interesting.
and I think they're going to
Mm.
keep Roy and Keely together. That's what I think.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
I'm just hoping for limited heartbreak. I feel like they're going to do a lot to just break fans' hearts in this final season series finale. Just like maybe Ted steps down or like, I don't know, someone dies. I'm just very nervous for this season.
I am too, because it seems like the natural progression of like shows like this. It's like, the struggle of getting in, and then you've seen some success, and then I'm hopeful for this season just to like, I don't know. I want the storybook. I don't want a lot of the hearty. I want them
Agreed.
to win the league and go out on a high. That's how
Yeah.
I want
Right.
things to go. I don't think so.
No.
I could see like a Coach Beard death. I
Yeah.
could see
Ooh.
like
That's
just
dark.
heavy stuff. But I think that we're
Agreed.
destined
They're
for that.
Give us
Yeah,
something
yeah.
heavy.
I think that Keely and Ted are going to end up together because that
Oh.
causes massive conflict
I don't
between
think
Roy.
it's gonna happen.
I've seen too many little
Okay.
smidges of that. Their first introduction, they had tons of chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the food
And then
feeding thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
fair
And then
point.
it fizzled, and
That's
then
how
Roy. Here
Rebecca
comes Roy.
tried to sabotage them too.
Yep. So I think that we're going to
Okay.
see a little bit more of that.
Mhm.
And I think Roy is going to get with the teacher. That's my. And
Okay.
I know maybe it's like
Interesting.
it's too easy to be true, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm
I
going.
think
Okay.
Ted will step down. Roy will
Ooh.
take the head coaching
Which
job
I'm okay with.
because
Interesting.
Ted's going to go back and coach. I'm going to say he's going to coach NFL in the
Okay.
in the States or
Cool.
something like that.
Okay.
I think Colin's going to become a star out of nowhere. That's my dark horse prediction. Colin, the soccer player, because Nate is now the coach of the other team, and
Right.
Nate ridiculed
Really
him.
hated Colin. You're
And
right.
now that Nate's gone, and he's the enemy, he's the protagonist. I think Colin is going to be the person
we
that
didn't
steps
even
Rise
get
to stardom.
into Nate, guys.
I know.
I feel like that's maybe a whole nother.
A whole other
We got
episode.
into him a little bit.
Yeah.
He sucks.
Yes, he does.
There we go. I'll
Yeah.
sum it up.
Some quick internet. We're over, but I'm going to run through quick internet things I found. We talked about Roy Kent being just a writer on the show originally, right? Did we talk about that before or during the first podcast episode?
I think it was first podcast episode.
Okay. So he was definitely like an actual, writer on the show. Then, auditioned right at the end and got the part. Nick Mohammed and Phil Dunster. I'm going to get to this in a second. Auditioned for the role of Higgins. Nick Mohammed is Nate. He plays the character of Nate.
Interesting.
He auditioned for Higgins first, didn't get it, then
Interesting.
got the part of Nate.
Huh.
Phil Dunster in real life is Jamie Tart. That's Jamie, but Phil Dunster is also the name of the lead character in Modern Family, I think.
Oh yeah.
Or is
I
it
think
Phil
Dumphy.
Dunphy? All right,
Mhm.
so I thought that I got confused. I was
Got
like,
it.
All right, so
Yep.
So Jamie Tart actually that actor also auditioned for Higgins. which is strange.
So odd.
And then got
Odd.
the part for Jamie Tart.
Yeah,
yeah.
he's so
Weird.
a Jamie Tart.
Exactly.
Nate
Yeah.
is so innate.
Nate is so innate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
That's why
weird.
they have
That's why they
casting
have
directors.
good jobs. Yeah, why they're good at their job. Yeah.
Marcus Mumford of Mumford and Sons does the composing of the music for Ted Lasso. They met at SNL in 2012, became friends. Jason Sudeikis and him. He asked him to do the music for the show.
That was one thing I didn't get into, but I loved the music in the
It's
show.
great
It's
music.
really
I mean,
good
the music
selection.
references and pulling from other music,
Yeah.
but also the original music.
The original music
that was
is
done
good.
by him.
That's cool.
The theme song is my
yeah.
favorite.
Oh, it's great.
Brings
It's great.
such joy.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. Doesn't get old. Zach Braff directed season 1, episode 2
Huh.
from Scrubs, the actor from Scrubs.
Yep.
That's the Biscuits episode. He directed that. We talked about how the biscuits tasted horrible originally, but then they tasted good.
Yep.
That was interesting. Disney almost refused to let It Go be used for the karaoke episode because they have the rights to the music, and they almost vetoed it, but then they let it last minute.
All right, Disney.
I know. Take a break.
Yeah, you've got enough
Pump the
money.
brakes, Disney.
You can
Yeah.
allow for them
Exactly.
to do it. Yeah.
It's not like Disney Plus or whatever it's called. What's the thing called?
Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Disney Plus.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
You can afford to let your thing sprawl a little bit.
Yeah.
The actors can actually play soccer. These are all actually pretty good soccer players.
Oh.
Yeah.
Karaoke is based on a true story. We talked about that. The actor who plays Keely made the character more funny. She suggested
Good for
to
her.
the writers, like, hey, let me roll with this and that, and it actually allowed the character to be more
Smart
funny.
decision.
And then the third season will be the final season.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
Rebecca in real life tried to be a pop star and failed. She has her own pop song out there. I think it's, let me
Well,
see.
she's got a great voice, so yeah.
Our
voice.
Kind of Love.
Yeah.
Our kind of love.
Yeah, so maybe we should find
Pop that in the show notes and
Yeah.
listen
Interesting.
to that.
Play
yeah.
it as
Interesting.
our tail out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for today. We want to appreciate everyone for tuning into this second, season 2 episode where we cover Ted Lasso. Want to encourage everyone to subscribe to the Grim Drive podcast on YouTube and give me a look on Twitter so we can engage about this episode. I'm going to post a link to this episode on Twitter. It's at Jotham LICSW. Thank you for listening to this episode of about Ted Lasso. We'll be back next week.